Can you have the choice of child that you want? By choice of child, I mean, can you determine the sex of the child that you want? So we want to answer the question, is it possible that instead of doing a trial and error, that you could decide the sex of your child? Oftentimes people ask, why should I choose to select the sex of my child? Family balance, where members of the family or parents believe that they have a certain sex, so they want the other sex, to balance up. People that need 2 male, 2 female, and the rest. So people just want it purely out of cultural sentiment and religious sentiment. Also, it's also quite important that people have this knowledge that this is possible. Because I believe that if most couples have this knowledge that they can choose the sex of their offspring, it would reduce the number of times women have to go to the labor ward. So what are the methods available if you want to select the sex of your child? So let's dive in. This process is called... We're looking at a very specific topic. Can you have the choice of child that you want? By choice of child, I mean, can you determine the sex of the child that you want? Because oftentimes you see people give birth to multiple children. You see a woman or a man or a family from a very low income strata, 6 children, 7 kids. And when you ask them, they tell you that they're trying for a particular sex of a child. It could be male, it could be female. So we want to answer the question, is it possible that instead of doing a trial and error, that you could decide the sex of your child? So let's dive in. This process is called sex selection, and it's not new. Oftentimes people ask, why should I choose to select the sex of my child? First, we have a medical perspective to these, and we also have what I could call a family perspective or an individual perspective. From the medical perspective, people choose to opt for a particular sex of a child as a way to avoid certain diseases. There are certain diseases that transmitted via the sex of a child. So things like hemophilia A and B, things like color blindness. These are diseases, that are hinged on the sex gene. So people want to avoid this, hence they opt for sex selection. It could also just be what we call family balance, where members of the family or parents believe that they have a certain sex, so they want the other sex, to balance up. People that need 2 male, 2 female, and the rest. So people just want it purely out of cultural sentiment and religious sentiment. Whatsoever is the reason why people seek to select the sex of their child, we believe that it is valid. And that's why we want to delve into this topic. So what are the methods available if you want to select the sex of your child? We have the natural method and we have the medical method. Let's look at the natural method. Although most of these methods don't have scientific backings to show that they're actually true, people believe that they actually work, so people practice it. Some of them are just pure myth and something to laugh about. Things like having to eat a particular kind of food or a particular kind of fruit, so you can have particular sex of a child. So you'll be told to eat this fruit or to eat this food, which has been discovered that it does not influence the sex of your child. Another thing that could be done naturally could be what is called Scheito method, where studying the cycle of a woman, looking at the time of ovulation, the time of sex is actually determined. And this is based on a proposition that there are differences between the Y chromosome carrying sperm, which leads to a male child, and the X chromosome carrying sperm, which leads to a female child. So have sex at a certain period of time, don't have sex at a certain period of time. That's the Scheito method. We also have another method that has to focus on the frequency of sex and the position of sex. So you shouldn't be surprised if you go on the internet space and you hear that if you have sex in the doggy position, that you're more likely to have a male child. Or you're being told that if you have sex frequently, or if a woman orgasms, that means she'll have a male child. If she doesn't, she'll have a female child, and the rest of the things. So these are just opinions by people that are not scientifically backed. But when it comes to the medical aspect of selecting sex, we have majorly three ways. First, we have sperm sorting, which has to do with sorting out the sperm to differentiate the X chromosome carrying sperm and the Y chromosome carrying sperm. And then when these sperms have been sorted, the Y or the X, depending on which sex is actually desired. So if a girl child is desired, the X chromosome carrying sperm is being transferred through IVF. And if a male offspring is being desired, the Y is being used for the process of IVF. We also have the pregenetic diagnosis, the prenatal genetic diagnosis, which has to do with the fact that when the eggs have been fertilized, about 6 days into their growth, they're being sorted out. The cells from the embryo are being tested and sorted out. Then the embryo that is the desired sex, male or female, is the one that is being transferred into the womb of the woman, while the other ones are discarded. Then we also have the post-implantation, where IVF is done and implanted in a woman, and if discovered that the child growing is not the desired sex, an abortion is done. Now, the process of sex selection raises the question of ethical and legal dilemmas. Starting with the legal dilemmas, is it okay to actually sort the sex of your child? Is it acceptable? Now, this has to do with the legal structure of various countries. Some countries have rules governing this. Some countries outrightly ban that there should be no sex selection, that a child is a child. So if you have a child, you can keep your child and take care of your child. But looking from the Nigerian perspective, the Nigerian legal system does not have any explicit law when it comes to sex selection. The only law pertains to abortion, as abortion is not allowed except the life of the mother is threatened. So if you can select the sex of your child without it resulting in abortion, you're good to go. That's why the post-implantation selection does not work in Nigeria, because it requires that if after implantation the growing embryo is not of the desired sex, you need to abort it. And this is something that is illegal in the Nigerian law. So you need to act around and research to see if in your area, if in your locality, the law of that area allows you to select the sex of your child. Coming to the ethical dilemmas, majority of people that involve themselves in this process face this dilemma. The first is dilemma because they ask themselves the question, is one sex better than the other? Is a male child, for example, better than a female child? Is a female child better than a male child? As medical professionals, that's a personal dilemma in which the person that is seeking the service will have to answer for his or herself. But this becomes an issue and compounds into long-term problems, oftentimes, if not sorted out. First, we have cultural issues where there is a favoritism of a particular sex, be it male or female, especially male, especially in the African climate. And when this is done, women are now forced into, giving birth to so many children, like we can see around, where because a man wants a male child, the woman has to go to the labor room time and time again to give him a male child. Although the brunt of choosing if the child will be male or female is on the man, but it's the woman that has to go to the labor room again and again. We also have the fact that if a selection is tilted towards one sex, over time, we're going to have an overpopulation of that sex, and that becomes a problem. So think of a population where there are more men than women. That is an issue on its own, or you think of a population where there is a very marked difference between the amount more women than men, that also is a problem. So these are the considerations that need to be looked at when a society or an individual or a country chooses to allow sex selection. And it's integral that this is done because it is becoming quite common that people are opting to select the sex of their offspring. And if something is not done about it, the consequences will surely come. Are there medical implications to sex selection? Oftentimes, sex selection has to go through the process of in vitro fertilization, the IVF, and the bulk of the complication is based on the process of doing the selecting, where the egg has to be taken and taken and fertilized, and then there is sex determined. The major medical consideration or implication stems from the question: when eggs are being fertilized and they become embryos, and then the needed sex is being chosen, what happens to the other embryos? What do we do to the other embryos that has already been fertilized? People answer it differently. Some persons believe that it can be cryopreserved to be used in the future by the same couple. Some couple decide to dedicate it to other couples who may be unable to produce these sex cells. And some just decided to donate it to research and also for studies. But whatever it is, these are the kind of consideration these are the kind of things that need to be put under consideration before you undertake this. Personally, as someone who have had to work in the fertility space, I want to say that the process of sex selection is something that should be allowed. Everyone should have the right to choose what they want, to choose the sex of their offspring. But there should be legal structures in place to ensure that this choice is regulated. This is to ensure that abuse is curtailed to the barest minimum. Also, it's also quite important that people have this knowledge that this is possible. Because I believe that if most couples have this knowledge that they can choose the sex of their offspring, it would reduce the number of times women have to go to the labor ward. Because if you decide to have 2 male offspring and 2 female offspring, if you have the resources, you can just do the selection and get the required sex of your offspring. And when that is done, you can take a good family planning method. It could be one that is temporary or permanent. And then the health of the mother and the children will be greatly preserved. So that is what we have for you on this episode. We'd love to hear from you. Would you opt for sex selection if you were opportune or if you had the resources? Do you think it's something that the Nigerian legal system or the Nigerian health system should allow? Would you want somebody you know to go through this? Or would you yourself, as a person, go through this? Let us hear from you, and we'll see you next time. Please do well to send your comments and send your feedback. We'll be reading from you. And if you have any topic that you want us to discuss going forward, we'll be glad to discuss this topic so that you can learn. Thank you so much. My name is Akwa Okpan, and I'll be your host on this podcast, the Intimate Matters Podcast, as we take a deep dive into the world of sexual and reproductive health. Till I see you next time, this is bye for now.